So today I want to talk about third-party agents, Mercs, different groups, extremists, what the government says, and who is actually responsible for the substation attacks. Now, I actually worked for both Progress Duke and Duke Energy over the years as a consultant in many capacities. I also worked for many telecom companies, and I actually held ratings for constructing towers and modifying them in several states. And one of the engineering companies I worked to lent me to a tower construction company in Charlotte. And then later I worked for a tower owning company which contract built towers for telecom companies and then leased them back to them. And I want to tell you a story. And I was sitting in my office one day and I was working on capital projects, tower improvements, and also was responsible for tower lighting. And that's all part of FAA compliance with the NOTAMs. And I got a telephone call and they said one of our towers was on the ground. And so I sent one of my teams there to investigate. And what had happened was there was a mountain and you drove up this road on the mountain. And if you looked on the right-hand side, there was our tower, which was a telecom tower. And we had 3 or 4 different telephone carriers on there doing cell phone stuff. And on the left side of the road, there was a gas company telemetry tower to send information on the gas pipeline and to control some of the automatic valves and switches. So what had happened here is somebody had got mad at the gas company and they decided they wanted to drop this gas company tower. So this fool hired another fool and told him if he goes and cuts this tower down with a hacksaw, that he'll give him $300. Now, both towers were 300-foot guy towers. So what a guy tower is, it has a structural steel small tower in the center, and then you have all the big cables coming down off of the tower to hold it in the air. So what is obvious from this lesson is you can take a hacksaw, and even though these cables are between 1 inch and 3 inches in thickness, you can actually take a hacksaw and cut down a guy tower. And that's exactly what happened, because fool number 1 paid fool number 3 to cut down the gas company tower. The problem was, and what resulted in us finding out what happened was, fool number 2 got confused. So when he went up the road, instead of turning left and cutting down the gas company tower, he cut down the telephone tower on the right. So when he went back to fool number 1 wouldn't pay him the $300 because he cut the wrong tower down. So naturally, he went to the cops and tried to blame fool number 1, and they both got arrested, tried, and put in prison. That's one example of the low tech that it takes to attack both communication towers and substations. I had a crew in Philadelphia when I was doing power company work, and that was a union area. And what was happening is we were actually putting communication systems inside substations, and the carrier tried to rip us off. So I bid to work, and they actually used my licenses illegally to do the work and hired somebody else to do it, and the municipality caught them. And in that instance, that was a self-inspection state. So you could hire a third party to inspect your work. So when the municipality called me and said I messed something up, I said we hadn't done any work in Philly for about 6 months. And they went and put stop work orders on like 30 or 40 sites. So then the telephone company called me that we were doing the telecom installations on the power company sites for, all crying and whining. And I says, well, since you tried to rip me off, what we're going to do is we'll do the work and then I'll hire a third party to inspect it. So we took over the work, and I had one crew go into a substation. They found a pair of boots with 2 feet in it. And that was an instance where somebody had broke into a substation, touched the wrong thing, and it burned them down to their boots. And was not enough left for the police and FBI and whatever to actually identify the person. So they never figure out who the person was that was represented by the 2 feet in the boots. In other instances, when I was working in North Carolina for Progress Energy and Progress Duke after the merger, several fraternities had these dares going where they would break into a substation and on dares touch stuff. Well, several of them got electrocuted and killed doing that. Now, that kind of gives you an idea of how easy it is to actually get into these facilities. Now, in another example, I want to let you know it's like in Durham, North Carolina, they had a drug war back in the 1990s. And what had happened was the people in Miami and New York were fighting over the territory here in North Carolina for distributing cocaine. And what ended up happening is the locals massacred both of them and then controlled the drug trade. And at that point in time, a crackhead would murder somebody for $20. So a lot of the drug hits were carried out by drug addicts and other people for $20 or $30. They'd kill somebody for a rock. So what I'm illustrating here is, regardless of who they tell you is responsible, it's so easy for a third party to be hired to do something to give plausible deniability to the organization actually behind these incidences. The frequency and types of incidents says that they're related. So please share your thoughts. We'll see you on the next video.